Hello, and welcome back to A320 Flight Sim. Today, we're going to be taking a trip down the beautiful west coast of New Zealand as we travel from Auckland International on the North Island to Queenstown on the South Island. Along the way, we're going to get a fantastic view of Mount Taranaki and the surrounding Egmont National Park with its unique, almost perfectly circular border. And after making our way down the coast to the South Island, we turn inland across the Southern Alps and begin our descent into Queensland. A twisty and turny Arnab approach follows the Kawarau River before finally lining us up for our final into runway 23. So let's hop into our Air New Zealand A320neo as we head out into a gorgeous sunny day, departing from runway 05 right at Auckland International Airport. Alright, we'll get her turned out here onto runway 05 right. Get those engines spooled up. And down the runway we go. I just downloaded this livery for Air New Zealand, special for this trip. I think it's a beautiful aircraft. You know, it's kind of simple, just the black and the white, but the design on it I think is just really nice. So we'll get her up into the air, get that positive climb. Go ahead and get the gear up here, and we'll get taken off here over Auckland. I've been to Auckland. It was a long, long time ago. Probably about, I'd say it's about been 40 years, I think. Maybe 30, 40 years since I was in Auckland. It was a long time ago when I was a teenager. And it was a beautiful place to visit. I was in New Zealand for about 3 or 4 days, and it was just an amazing trip. Don't remember as much of it as I'd like to, just because it was so long ago. We'll make that turn out and start heading towards the coast. And as we get out towards the coast, then we'll go ahead and make another big left turn. Right now we're making that big right turn heading towards the coast. When we took off from Auckland, we had to circle back around and turn back towards the west. And then now we're headed out here towards the west coast of New Zealand. As you can see, this is the North Island of New Zealand. And New Zealand is made up of about 300 islands, but the main ones that people think of are the North Island and the South Island. And then once we get out over the water here, we'll make another big left-hand turn and start heading south down the coast here and towards the Mount Taranaki that I was telling you about just a little while ago, which is a beautiful volcanic mountain surrounded by a national forest, which is an amazing sight from the air. So we're going to take a look at that here as we head down the coast. And here it is. We've arrived at Mount Taranaki. So as you can see, when I first jumped into the sim and I was flying this, I thought it was a glitch. You know, sometimes things don't render well in the simulator, and I thought, what a weird thing to have that perfectly circular area around this mountain, and I thought it was a mistake. And then when I looked it up, I realized that's actually a protected forest that surrounds the volcano there, and it is very precise. As you can see, it's really almost a perfect circle, and then there's that one little area that kind of juts out there towards the coast a little bit, but that is all a protected forest area by New Zealand that can't be developed or anything, and so you can see it makes a very clear delineation there in a lot of places. And again, I thought it was a rendering issue when I first saw it, but very beautiful to watch from the air. I really enjoyed flying over this and then learning a little bit more about it because it was something I didn't know a lot about, but a very pretty mountain. It sits at about 2,500 meters or a little bit over 8,200 feet. And it's one of the taller mountains there in New Zealand. I believe when I read about it, I think it's the second highest mountain on the North Island. So just enjoy that little view here as we fly over, and we'll have a little quick shot out the window as if you're a passenger. And then we'll continue on, and then next time you'll see we'll be hitting that north coast of the South Island of New Zealand. So enjoy. Alright, well, we've arrived at the South Island of New Zealand, and you can see here a quick view of the Farewell Spit, which is the little tip of the island that is one of the most northern points of the southern island. And as we keep going, we make a little turn here, and we straighten out and head down the west coast of the South Island. And eventually what's going to happen is we're going to just follow that pretty much straight along the side of the coastline for quite a while And then we're going to get to the point where we need to make our turn inland. When we turn inland, we're going to be crossing the Southern Alps, which is a large mountain range that takes up the vast majority of the middle part of the southern island of New Zealand. And so we'll need to cross those in order to get into our final destination there in Queenstown. Once we start our approach, once we start our descent, we're going to descend, but because we're going to stay above these mountain tops. But then once we get across them and inland a little ways, then that's where it's going to matter which one we're going into. So today, for this landing, we went into runway 23. I'm going to show you that chart in just a second. But the other runway is 05, of course, which is the opposite. And both of those have very interesting approaches. So 23, which we're doing here today that I'm showing you, you can see we come in and then we make this big looping turn, and then we follow the river that I was talking about earlier. And we follow that river for a little while until we get into that valley, and then we can straighten out and we have a straight shot that lasts about 5-10 miles of final into runway 23. Now the other option into Queenstown is runway 05. So of course it's always depending upon the wind direction on which they're going to take you. But the 05 approach is kind of fun too, because again, so kind of starting from that same point, that same as we come in on our arrival, instead we would go the other direction, make another big circular loop around, and this time we're going to come in over the lake. And as we come in over that lake, we drop down, and then we kind of have to take that little twisty turn there to get staying over the water between the mountains and then into runway 05. So I've done both those approaches. They're both really, really fun. But today, because of the wind, we ended up going into 2-3. So let's see as we get down here, and when we get to that first approach point, we'll check it out from there, and you'll get to see some of these turns as we head along the river. All right, so we have completed most of our descent here towards Queenstown, and we're making our first turn here to get to our initial entry point into our RNAV Zulu 23 approach into Queenstown. As we make this turn, it's the final turn of our arrival, and what you're going to see is off in the distance here in just a second is that lake I was talking about earlier, and that's the difference between coming into runway 23 and runway 05. So as I make this turn, you see that lake off to the right there. If I was going into runway 05, I would have peeled off to the right and come in over the top of that lake, circled around and come in from the other side. But instead we're coming from this side. You can see Queenstown out there just over the top of the engine, and you'll see it here from a different angle as we parallel the town, and then we're going to circle back around and come in. So there it is, Queenstown again. You can see the lake in the distance, that little inlet down there in the lower right, and that's where the airfield is at. And we're going to come right down that mountain that's right underneath the airplane. There is where we're going to come in. So we're going to start making that circle around. We're around 9,000 feet at this point. We've hit our first waypoint, and we're making that big circle. And as we circle, we're also descending. When we get over here, about this point, we're starting to pick up the river now, and we're getting into that valley at this point. We're now down to around 5,000 feet as we get over the top of the river. And we're going to continue that descent. You can see here we've picked up the river, we picked up the valley. Again, we're still sitting at around 5,000, dropping down, lined up nice into this river valley. Continuing our descent. And we're going to now make that left-hand turn back at about 3,300 feet. And you're going to see the airport appear up ahead of us here. As we circle back over the top of the river, we're about 5 nautical miles out now. We're going to go ahead and drop those gear and get ready for our stable approach at this point. Flaps are already down. We're already full flaps at this point. We've got our ground spoilers ready. Everything should be ready. Looks like a nice stable approach. We drop down between the mountains here and line ourselves up for runway 23. Looking good so far. Very beautiful view coming right over the top of the river. Line it up and right down 23, 2-3. and right on the marks. Really happy about that. Those of you who've been watching my videos, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll notice that two of the things I have a tendency to do are, one, I have had a tendency to float in the past, so I was really happy with this landing from the fact that I put it right down on the marks, right where I wanted it. Still to the right, I really have a problem with keeping it on center, perfectly on center. I really have a tendency to kind of push my plane to the right for some reason, even if there's not a wind. And on this day, it was pretty calm winds. I think it was only a couple knot wind, and I don't even think it was pushing me from that direction. It's just a thing I'm working on as a new flight sim pilot. I'm just trying to maintain that center line a little bit better. But the first thing I was really trying to concentrate on was hitting my marks a little bit better and not floating my landings so much. And this landing I felt like did really well. So we're going to go ahead and circle back around, get our aircraft back to the gate here in Queenstown, get all our passengers off. Hopefully they'll have a good time down here on the South Island of New Zealand. I hope that you enjoyed this flight from Auckland to Queenstown, New Zealand, as we explored the beautiful islands of New Zealand and got a little bit of a view of Mount Taranaki along the way. And again, if you could like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. And again, if you know anybody that would enjoy flight sim videos, go ahead and share this channel with them. We've done a great job recently surpassing 1,000 subscribers. I think we're actually up to about 1,400 as of the time of this video. And my current goal is we want to get that up to 2,500. So you've been amazing with getting these videos out to people that you know that might like them. So just continue that. And again, drop me a comment if there's a place you'd like to see, if there's a city pair you'd like me to fly between to see some highlights, or if maybe there's a difficult or challenging landing or takeoff or something that maybe you'd just like to see done in the simulator. So for now, again, like and subscribe. And again, thank you so much for supporting A320 Flight Sim, and have a great day.